Right, this is video 11.03, the second part of the cerebrum, and we're going to look at the cerebrum from some different vantage points. So what I have here is a superior view. So this is a superior view. And this is going to be anterior. So up here we have the prefrontal cortex, and back here is going to be posterior. So back here we have the visual cortex. And what we see is that we have a left half and we have a right half. And I'm just going to kind of do a highlighter and rough these out, but leave some space in the middle. So and I'm going to put a color right down the middle. I'm going to use highlighter again. It seems to work better on black and white. And then let's make the right side blue. So here I have in yellow the left hemisphere. P-H-E-R-E. And in blue, I have the right hemisphere. P-H-E-R-E. And in pink, I have a structure that connects the left and right. It's called the Corpus Callosum, and we'll talk about that here in a second. C-A-L-L-O-S-U-M. It's interesting. Let's talk about our hemispheres first. Is that regarding the hemispheres, they have cross function. So the hemispheres cross. So I'm left-handed. That means that the right side of my brain, the motor cortex of the right side of my brain controls my left hand, and the motor cortex on my left side controls my right hand. So because I'm left-handed, the motor cortex on my right side is going to be a little bit larger than my left. The same thing we see that for things like motor control and vision. So my left eye is processed back in the right hemisphere, and my right eye is processed back in the left hemisphere. The only thing I think that does not cross hemispheres is auditory, is sound. They have specialized function. So we talked about the fact that we had Broca's area and Wernicke's area on the left side. And what we see is that overall, the left handles language, reading, writing. Language, reading, writing. And I'm just going to keep writing. Versus the right side. The right side handles what we see processed on the right side are our emotional responses, creativity, the ability to see in 3 dimensions, face recognition. And so the left and the right side really do kind of live different lives. Then we have this structure here, the corpus callosum. Let's label 2. I forgot. The fissure that goes between the left and the right is called the longitudinal fissure. Longitudinal fissure. So this structure, the corpus callosum, connects the left and right half. Connects the left and right hemispheres. And so if we have information on the right that needs to go to the left, and vice versa, it travels along these this structure. And if we see it, if we could dissect, what we would see is that there's these long fibrous tracts that actually extend like this, but we only see just a little bit of it exposed because we see what's visible through the longitudinal fissure. So In people that have severe epilepsy, one of the things that they will do is they will come through and so let's talk about the corpus callosum over here. Corpus callosum. In extreme cases, so if you have severe seizures, so in extreme cases, the corpus callosum can be cut. And that helps eliminate some of the seizure activity for people that have severe epilepsy. But didn't we just say that this side of the brain, or the vision on this side of the brain gets processed over here, and vision over here gets processed back here? Yeah, so how do you see? Well, what's really cool is if you cut that corpus callosum, you have a long period or some kind of a period where you have some deficiencies, but the brain can rewire itself. It can actually set itself up so that we can process on the same side, and it'll do that, it'll change. The brain actually has quite a bit of plasticity. Plasticity means it can change and it can rewire itself. So that's pretty cool. But again, so those are our hemispheres and the corpus callosum that attaches the two. The other thing in the cerebrum we need to talk about are what are called the basal nuclei. So we're going to look at a coronal section here. And what you see up on this diagram is that they've done this coronal section. Coronal section. So here are those tracks. You see the corpus callosum in very faint. We have gray matter on the outside and we have white matter on the inside. Now, back in the last chapter, we talked about why gray matter is gray and why white matter is white. And we said that gray matter is unmyelinated. And white matter is myelinated. And we said that nerve impulses travel much faster along myelinated than they do unmyelinated. Now, also here in gray, here's that cerebral cortex. So everything we see, this section here that extends all the way around the brain is the cerebral cortex. And you'll notice that the cerebral cortex is mostly gray matter. Well, don't we need to get signals around? Well, it's not very thick. Actually has a pretty thin section. And you'll notice we have more gray matter down here. And this is still, so this whole thing is the cerebrum. Got here, here, and here. And then this is another structure we're not going to talk about. And we have it on the right and the left. So what happens is, remember we had the primary sensory cortex, and then we had the primary motor cortex. And I told you guys that signals from the sensory cortex, if I have the sensory cortex up here, and let's just, I'm gonna cross that out. I'm gonna say, let's say this is the motor cortex. We really don't need to talk about the sensory cortex. So this is my motor cortex. We said that that initiates movement. So we have movement is initiated. In the motor cortex. And we talk about the fact that signals bounce around. And what we see is that the sensory cortex has signals that come in, they get bounced down, they go back up to the motor cortex. Well, the motor cortex then sends signals down into another area of the cerebrum. I'm going to wipe this out. Bugs me. So what happens is the motor cortex then sends the signal down to these guys. These three. So we're going to label this 1, 2, 3. This is 3, and this is 2. So we have areas of gray matter deep inside the cerebrum, and this whole thing is still the cerebrum. So this is still the cerebrum. And they have a function. These are called the basal nuclei. You can walk and talk. You can walk and try to open up apps on your phone. How is that possible? How can your brain send a signal for you to walk while you're doing a complex function with your prefrontal cortex? And the answer is, it comes down to these basal nuclei. These areas of gray matter allow motor functions or movement to continue without active thought. So in other words, once the motor cortex decides, okay, hey, we're going to walk, it sends the signal down to this area of your brain, and it allows you to keep doing what you're doing without continuing to send signals from the top. Now, each of these guys have a name. So let's go with 1, 2, 3. Collectively, these are all basal nuclei. The areas labeled 1 are called the caudate, C-A-U-D-A-T-E, nucleus. The area labeled 2 is called the putamen, P-U-T-A-M-E-N, and the area labeled 3 is called the globus pallidus, G-L-O-B-U-S, P-A-L-L-I-D-U-S. So we can see that the cerebrum, in closing, is just a really complicated structure in the brain. We can look at it from all these different vantage points and we see different things. If we look at those lateral views, we get to see all those areas of the cortex. Again, that's represented here, that have different functions. If we look at it superior, we can see the left and right hemisphere. And on this, you're seeing this would be one hemisphere, this would be the other. And then if we look at it in a coronal section, we can see that we even have deep these basal nuclei that are going to let motion continue once it starts. And that's the area of the brain we're going to spend the most time on. The other 3 areas we're going to cover in one video. So that wraps up the cerebrum for us. Thanks for watching.